and we know that they're going to be popping in. So we have about 40 minutes because the kids haven't had recess yet today. We haven't had a chance. But we know everyone's been really super excited about this session.
Oh, cool.
Which is fascinating. Like, we all are fascinated with bats. And I know that they're our friends and they do some super cool things for the environment. So learning about them is always a great thing. So I'm going to be keeping my eye on the chat for questions. But as we know, when we talk to Lannis, she'll talk about a couple of the animals, and then we'll have some questions, and then we'll do a couple more animals and more questions. So hope that works for everyone, and I'll be monitoring, and I'm going to turn it over to Lannis now.
Cool. Well, welcome back for those that have been able to attend some of our sessions, and welcome if this is your first time. As Molly said, my name is Lannis, and I am at the Luxley Science and Nature Center. That's located in Ann Arbor, Michigan. So a little bit of a drive for some folks, but it's really cool that we're able to come to you virtually. And I'm currently standing in one of the houses we have here at the center called the Critter House. Usually, a big part of my job happens to deal with the animal care that is revolved around the animals that live here inside the Critter House, including the animals you're going to meet today. But because we have these animals here and they're amazing teachers, we're really excited to offer some of these programs to help talk more about the animals that are housed here. And today, we are talking about an incredibly important creature. We are diving into the world of bats. Now, I know a lot of people may have had experiences with bats, whether at your house or maybe near your backyard, or maybe this is your first time really even talking about this creature. So today what we're going to do is we're going to try to go over the basics, how we identify bats as a unique kind of mammal. We're going to meet 3 live bats located around the world, even ones we find here in Michigan and Canada. And then from there, as Molly mentioned, we'll also be able to pause, take some questions, but really focus in on why bats are so important. Because a lot of the bats, especially the ones that are going to be today, are actually very important for animals just like you. Bats provide a lot of benefits to humans in more ways than one, so we'll make sure that we highlight those as well. But when we think about bats in general, or how we're comparing bats from other creatures, one of the things we usually mention about bats is that they're the only mammal that can fly. Now, that's pretty key because that's a very unique adaptation based from other creatures such as birds or maybe other ones that have wings, insects, and more. And even though we say it's the only mammal that can fly, there may be mammals called things like flying squirrels, and yeah, they can glide per se, but they can't actually sustain flight like a bat. Other characters, though, that we look for is that bats are primarily nocturnal, meaning they're usually most awake in the evening, or that's when they prefer to hunt or be active. We also know that bats are, like humans, that they are mammals. They are warm-blooded. They have furry bodies, even though we have some fur hair around us. They raise their young, and they have live young. And the really cool thing about bats is that there are over 1,200 species of bats. Bats make up almost 20% of all mammal species. There's a ton of them. They're on every single continent except Antarctica, and that means there's also a lot of variety when it comes to talking about different kinds of bats too. Now, when we talk about their hands, though, I got to get back to their wings, because you, humans, you actually have something that a bat has besides furry bodies, and that's these. The name or the scientific term we usually use when we talk about bats is the word Chiroptera. And what that is it just means hand wing. That's because a bat's entire wing is actually just their hand. See, this is actually the skeleton of a bat, and you can see the wing, all the bones that stretch through here, that's your finger bones. And the great thing is that their wing is the entire size of their body. Want to know the best part? That means you were a bat, your hand would be the entire length of your body. That'd be like giving somebody the biggest high five in the world. And that means all of our finger bones would drape down to the floor. But for bats, they have to have wings like this too. Larger wings and these larger, longer bones not only allow it so that they can fly more efficiently and effectively, it means they can sustain flight too, different from other animals like a flying squirrel or other animals with wings. So this skeletal structure is very important. But the other strange thing is that bats actually fly very differently than birds do. And in some ways, having their hands be their wings can make bats more flexible than other animals that can fly. When we are comparing a wing structure from animals, I have another picture I want to show you. And we're looking at the skeletal structure, so you can see here. There's actually one of a human, a bird, and a bat. Right now, we're just going to pay attention to these two. And you're going to notice, if you look at the bones within a bird's wings, they're kind of all smooshed together near the top. Now, what that means is birds have these great soaring wings. And it allows them to glide or soar through the air or make these really long journeys. Well, the only thing, though, is that having these long wings can also mean that it's harder for them to brace themselves from wind currents or do flips in the air or cut through bushes and trees. However, for bats, because they have their fingers that are separate within their wings, they can move individual parts of their wing just like we can move individual fingers. That means they can coil their wings around themselves and spin in the air, or they can flip themselves upside down to grab something by their toenails to hang upside down. There are some bats that are even faster than birds too because of how they move their wings in flight thanks to this bone structure. So their wings are incredibly important and honestly very cool feature when it comes to talking about bats and comparing them to other mammals or really just other animals in general. Now, we won't see a bat fly today, mostly because we want them to hang out near the camera for you guys to see up close. But beyond being able to be the only mammal that flies, there's lots of other features or things we can call adaptations that help these individual bats survive. And the first bat we're going to meet isn't even one that lives near us. It's a fruit bat, or something we call a mega bat. Now, scientists like to label things. They like to put things in bigger groups. And usually you can think of the term mega, meaning that this is going to be a larger bat than we normally see. There are also bats that fall in a category called microbats. These are the kinds of bats that we find in Michigan and Canada. Most of them are insect eating. The cool thing is that when we meet this bat, that means not only can we focus on other diversity that is found around the world with these creatures, we can talk about why it's important where it lives. All of the bats you meet today kind of have a job, if you will, or they help out certain creatures, including humans, in kind of a variety of ways. Now, we're just meeting one bat of this species, but it's important to note that this bat is also known for something we call migration. It migrates even to one specific part off of a country in Africa. Only when they migrate, there's not just one of them. There are thousands of them. This is a picture of just all of one species of bat, the one we're going to meet today. And even though we might not be able to see all the details up close, you can imagine these tiny little black clouds, swarms of bats moving through the forest, but also their safety in numbers. It will be able to migrate during the day. Now, the bat is just off screen here, so I'm still here even though I'm grabbing this guy. And this guy stays in my hand the whole time. For this first bat, we'll also let him hang upside down, so that way he's a little more comfortable. And see if we can talk a little bit more about the kind of bat that he is. Let's see if we can take a closer look. Okay. There, I'll make sure I hold him up so folks can see him. You can use my face as a reference for how big he is. I saw that somebody said, oh, maybe he's like a flying fox. Flying foxes are considered to be the largest types of bats that we have here in the world. This guy we usually just call a mega bat. He's not quite in the flying fox group, but he is definitely larger than most. And I find a lot of people think that mega bats kind of look like puppies or little dogs, mostly because of how their face looks. But the shape of their face is actually pretty important. Do you see that really long nose or snout? He even sticks his tongue periodically. That's because he's a fruit-eating bat. He can stuff his face inside fruit and use that really long snout to be able to pick away at pieces of fruit, grabbing seeds or other juices, pulp, and more in order to be able to chomp on. They also have a variety of tiny sharp teeth that they can use to really gnaw on those pieces of fruit. The type of bat that I have in my hand is a bat we call a straw-colored fruit bat. And they're commonly found in the central portions of Africa. So we have an African species with us today. Oh, bless you. And being a fruit eater has a lot of benefits. Not only is it pretty tropical or warmer there all year round, meaning you can usually find your food in all the seasons, unlike here in Michigan where our fruit doesn't survive our winters. But the funny thing is that also means you have to have a lot of habitat if you have thousands of you migrating all at once to look for fruit. Well, luckily, straw-colored fruit bats and most fruit bats have a very unique way of being able to make sure they have fruit for the future. Now, here at the Nature Center, some of the fruit we see this guy has a variety of melons like cantaloupe or watermelon, papayas and mangoes, kiwis or bananas, figs, berries are some of the things they can find out in their habitats. Some more citrusy fruits like oranges and persimmons and more. Whatever they find in their natural space that isn't too acidic is usually really good for fruit bats. But here's the funny thing. Let's say you're a bat and you eat a piece of fruit and you accidentally eat a seed. And you aren't really going to digest that seed. Your body doesn't really work that way. So what happens? You can only imagine, just like what humans do, they have to go to the bathroom and they, well, poop it out. Now, that seems funny at first just because poop is a funny word, but bat poop is incredibly important. It's because it has a lot of nutrients for that seed. It's almost like I put a little built-in fertilizer with that seed inside bat poop. In fact, bat poop is so important, we have a name for it. We typically call it guano. And you all, farmers included, you can buy bat guano off the internet. You can buy bat poop, but it's because it's so good for plants. See, bat feces or guano has a lot of nitrogen in it, which is great for plants as they're looking to grow. That's one of the prime nutrients they need. And so from there, if you have a seed and you accidentally go to the bathroom, well, not accidentally, but if you have a seed in it, it's kind of like a built-in fertilizer to help you or that plant seed grow. So if you have thousands of these guys all migrating to the same location, all eating seeds and pooping them out, well, you can imagine that you're basically planting your own fruit forest for you and your fellow bats to go hang out in the future. Some of these guys are responsible even for building certain rainforests because so many types of bats have visited them and have helped fertilize those plants in order to make it a really luscious, diverse space. So these guys are amazing at seed dispersal because they travel so far and also helping those plants to grow thanks to the poop. I know it's kind of silly, but it's great since it's nutritious for plants. Now, these guys, we also classify it as a megabat because you can usually see the larger features, larger wingspan. He has a slightly longer body. He also has these longer ears. You can see he's kind of using them like radar in order to be able to hear everything that's going on. A longer snout, and then you might be able to see it if you turn the space around, but larger eyes. Now, sometimes when we talk about bats, we talk about an adaptation called echolocation. Well, this bat does not echolocate. He doesn't actually use sound to help him navigate or find food. This guy mostly relies on his large eyes or his eyesight and his sense of hearing. Those larger eyes, especially for other nocturnal animals too, allow him to pick up smaller cues or smaller optics, especially if there's just the moon and the stars in the sky. So he doesn't really need to rely on echolocation in order to find his food. He also has a great sense of smell, and since fruit can sometimes be very potent, he's able to smell it out really well. So straw-colored fruit bats, big job is seed dispersing and kind of helping build those rainforests. And we can imagine that for a lot of other tropical bats too. The fun thing, though, is it also allows you to kind of gain exposure to these bats because we don't hear about them often in our spaces. Here in Michigan, since we don't have any fruit bats or megabats in general, this gives us the opportunity to understand how bats across the world not only interact with their habitats, but also interact and benefit for us humans and other creatures. There's a lot of other animals that live in that rainforest, which means this guy can sometimes be responsible for even helping those homes or plants that those other animals live in to grow. But there are predators out there to these bats, even though they are large. Other nocturnal predators like owls or birds of prey sometimes are known to eat bats. And another one that we don't think of a lot of here, snakes. There are snakes out there that also roost in the trees, pretend to be tree branches, and can sometimes hunt bats. These guys, too, they don't roost in caves. When I say roost, I mean they don't hang there or nest there. They actually stay in the forest on tree branches, which also means that's where their predators can find them, too. That's why migrating in numbers makes it a lot safer for you to travel, even if you're only traveling a couple hundred miles. Now, we're going to head and give this guy a break. He's been doing a great job meeting all of you. Pay attention to all the sounds that we're hearing. Those cone-shaped ears are always a lot of fun to watch, too, especially how they work. And then when we're talking about our next bat, the next bat that we're going to be able to meet is another megabat. We're not actually going to see this guy eat. I do see a question on that in the chat, mostly because these guys have a strict feeding schedule and they don't eat throughout the day. We do have food available for them throughout throughout the entire for them to munch on and forage if they choose to. But these guys typically prefer to eat more closer to the evening. Not only does that kind of work with their biological clock out in the wild, but also we don't want to overfeed our bats and have them be too flat in order to fly. But I see there's some other people that are snacking as well. That's great too. You can actually eat a lot of the fruits that these bats are eating. We were talking about bananas and mangoes, papayas and watermelon. A lot of that too, we humans love as well. And some of those fruits are there thanks to bats. So next time you see a bat or talk about fruit bats, make sure you say thank you, especially if you're eating a piece of fruit. Okay, now
and one of the questions way back was, what is that particular bat's favorite fruit?
So his favorite fruit, I guess in my opinion, would be melons. It may be because it has a sweeter taste to it. It's hard to judge, though, what its favorite fruit is, mostly because it eats most of the fruit we give for it all at once. I will say a lot of our fruit bats typically pick out bananas and papaya and watermelon over anything else that we feed them, or at least that's their first choice. We do have a couple other species of bats that prefer oranges or more citrusy fruits or grapes. But these specific larger fruit bats, our straw-colored fruit bats, I would say our melons and banana, if they had to choose a favorite, it would probably be on the prime on their list. It's a good question. It's one of my favorites too. I love watermelon, especially as the seasons get warmer. Were there any other questions that folks had either about our first fruit bat or actually bats in general? I want to make sure that I didn't miss any of our other chats. I saw a lot of people talking about fruit though, which is great.
Yeah. How big can a bat get?
How big can a bat get? That's a great question. The largest bat that is alive today is a type of bat we call a flying fox. It's a Malayan flying fox, and their wingspan can reach up to about 6 feet long. Now, bats, I wouldn't say are large in that they are tall, although that bat reaches over a couple feet tall just to be able to have that kind of wingspan. But
We lost your audio. We lost your audio.
I know why I did that. There we go. I'm back. Can you guys hear me okay? Yeah. Perfect. Okay. So we're talking about how those flying foxes actually have the wingspan like an eagle. And that allows them to be able to move themselves and their whole body system whenever they're foraging for food. So imagine the wing of an eagle and then compare that to a bat. That's how some big bats can get. We, in Michigan, we don't really have any bats that are bigger than maybe the size of our hand, even if their wingspans can be up to about a foot long. So that's why we just have micro bats that are here. I did see somebody ask too, how long can a bat live? And that's an awesome question. Because bats being small mammals, we would usually think like they live a very long time. But a bat's genome and their immune system is so unique that bats can actually live to be incredibly long for their size. Some of the bats that live in Michigan, even if they're smaller than my hand, they can live to be up to 10 years old. There are some fruit bats, though, that can live to be up to 40 years old. And it's all how their body impacts or is affected by stress, how they're able to tackle different viruses or diseases, and as long as they're able to find all the resources that they need in their habitat, they can live to have this incredibly long lifespan. It's incredible. We humans, we're even studying bats to understand how we can increase our lifespan. And better yet, how our immune system works differently than bats too. Cool question. Okay, I know there's a couple other ones that are coming up, but I'm going to get our second bat out first so that way we make sure we have time to eat all the animals we have for you today. This next bat is a fruit bat, and it's still in the megabat group, if you will. But there's one key difference between this bat and the first one we've met, and that this fruit bat echolocates. Now, if we talk about echolocation, remember I'm still here even though I'm driving this bat. When I mean echolocation, I mean bats that are using sound either to navigate, maybe to find food. Well, this bat, even though its food doesn't move or go anywhere, it still has to rely on sound for a couple other reasons. Also, if anybody has ever read the book Stellaluna, you probably will recognize this bat because it's the same kind of bat as Stellaluna. Now, this guy we hold upright is just a little more comfortable in this position when he's meeting people. And while he is smaller than our first megabat, I know a lot of people think this guy is cute. He is still considered a megabat because of those larger features, mostly the larger eyes that we see on him too. I know, buddy, I have to be taller in order for people to see. There we go. Now, this kind of bat is called a an Egyptian fruit bat. Our first one was a straw-colored fruit bat. And Egyptian fruit bats are very widely distributed throughout Africa, usually in the northeastern realm, maybe even near the Mediterranean Sea. But, like I said, Egyptian fruit bats can echolocate, which is kind of weird for a fruit bat if your food doesn't go anywhere. But this guy, he actually relies on echolocation in order to be able to navigate around the forest. He does have pretty good eyesight, don't get me wrong, but he actually can also use echolocation to find things up close. And how he does it is that these bats, they use tongue clicks. They actually take their tongue out and they go in a way that we can hear these guys when they echolocate. But that's because they're trying to make sound, being able to travel in a variety of directions using those sound waves to find things like trees or caves, because this fruit bat is known to roost in certain cave areas, even though their food's not there. Now, I love the reactions I'm seeing on chat. I find a lot of people think this bat to be probably the cutest of the ones that we meet. But it's interesting to see a lot of those facial features. It's all there for a reason. That longer snout, the larger eyes, those longer ears, great nocturnal adaptations to be able to see better or hear smaller sounds, and then a longer nose to really dive its face into its fruits to be able to grab it all. But Egyptian fruit bats are also really well known to be amazing pollinators. Birds, butterflies, bees, and bats are all known to be in that big pollinator family. I have to readjust you there. And what's great about that is that there are some bats in the world, hold on, dude, I have to make sure people can see. There you go. And some bats in the world that are the sole pollinators for certain plants. That means they're the only animal that pollinates that kind of plant. Usually the one people hear about is agave or an agave plant. Bats are the only animal that pollinates that, and that's the kind of fruit that makes things like tequila. But this bat is known for helping pollinate a very particular tree that we find in Africa. It's called a baobab tree. It's one of the largest species of trees that we find in Africa. If you've ever seen the movie The Lion King, you've probably seen this tree. That is a tree that the baboon Rafiki lives in. But the cool thing is that that tree is actually very beneficial to humans. There are a lot of humans that take the fruit of that tree and they'll make health or beauty products from it, like soap, shampoos, lotions. Even the products you might be using at home may have pieces of baobab powder in it, which is basically dried up fruit. Well, guess who's one of the only animals that pollinates that tree? This guy. Egyptian fruit bats are studied to be one of the only kind of pollinators that can actually eat the fruit and pollinate that tree. But what that means then is without fruit bats, that tree wouldn't exist. Since that tree is so large, it also offers sometimes the only bit of shade that we can find in certain areas in Africa, or better yet, it can be home to the thousands of other creatures. So if you don't have that tree, you actually lose homes for certain animals. Even humans sometimes build houses in those trees because they're so big. And so from there, these guys, they're known as a keystone species, meaning without them, other animals couldn't thrive or exist in that habitat. Beavers are another keystone species, a native one that we might find by our spaces. But for these guys, they're one of the most important species out there because of how they pollinate those trees and more. That's why we talk about fruit bats so much too, especially when we're comparing them to things like bees or butterflies. They're kind of bees of the rainforest, if you will, being able to pollinate a variety of plants and plants that we humans rely on too in order to survive. Now, the cool thing is Egyptian fruit bats are also popular thanks to that book Stella Luna, and that book also references a lot of the adaptations that we focus on today. Also shows you the differences between bats and birds. I'm loving how in our chat room the majority of us are just thinking just how cute this guy is. Hopefully it helps gain a little more appreciation about how we can better respect bats or enjoy their company and learn more about them too. Even though we won't find anything like an Egyptian fruit bat near our space. It's pretty cool to be able to see them up close. Now, we're going to go ahead and give this guy a break too, just because he's getting really wiggly, and I want to make sure that we respect his time to be able to meet everybody. But I also want to get back to that thing we talked about earlier, echolocation, because that's one other key adaptation, beyond being the only mammal that flies, that a lot of people focus on when it comes to bats. After we talk a little bit about echolocation and before we meet our final bat, I'll also make sure that I pause a little bit for questions, because echolocation can be kind of a strange concept. Here's the best way to think about it, though. Echolocation is all about using sound in order to be able to either find food or navigate in the dark. Many bats, not all, but many bats that echolocate rely on using sound to make sure they don't run into trees or to find their food because they don't have great eyesight. There is no such thing as a blind bat, but there are a lot of bats that can't see as well as they can hear. So therefore, they rely on sound instead of being able to see in the dark in order to be able to be or navigate when they're nocturnal. Now, I have a picture that kind of shows you a cool way how echolocation works. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put it up on the screen, and I'll make sure that folks can see what I'm referencing to. What you're going to notice is you're going to see a bunch of different trees along our image. You have a couple different bats. Then you have all these lines of different colors. Here's what happens when a bat echolocates. First, it's going to make some kind of noise. Sometimes we can hear it, sometimes we can't. Well, then what happens is that sound's going to travel through something. One of the reasons you can hear me right now is because there's air in this room. There's air around it. The sound can travel through the air. If we were in space, there'd be no way you could hear me because, well, there's no air in space. There's no way for that sound to travel through something. And then sound travels like a wave. And almost you can use it with your arm in a wave-like motion. And as it does that, it goes out until it, bam, hits a solid object, like a tree or an insect. And then that sound has to come back. A lot of us might have heard about echoing. If we go out into a canyon or a big valley and we say things really loud, we can hear it happening over and over again. Well, what's happening is that sound is bouncing off solid objects around it and then coming back to you. So for bats, what happens is the sound they make bounces off something, comes back to the bat, and the bat can take that echo, the sound they hear, to understand the location of objects, sometimes even how far away they are, or better yet, how fast it's moving. Now, the next bat that we are going to be able to meet today is actually a bat that lives around our spaces. It's a one that's very common here in Michigan, but we actually find it in a lot of different spaces in Canada, or bats that are related to it too. But what I want to do is I actually have a cool device here called an echo-meter. And what this does is it allows us to hear the different echolocating noises of some other kinds of bats. Now, I have some other previous recordings that I want to make sure that I play you about this kind of bat. See if you guys can hear what it sounds like, because here's the weird thing. A lot of bats, we can't hear echolocating. The pitch is too high for us to hear. But we can use cool devices like this to kind of get an idea of what it sounds like if we could hear these bats. Most of the time, it's a bunch of clicks. But here, I'll play this and see what you think. You guys hear that? Kind of sounds like a robot. Now, those clicks are actually the sound waves, the clicks that the bats are making, those pulses where they're sending the sound out until it hits a solid object. And sometimes you can even tell what species of bats you're listening to based on the kinds of pulses, the frequency, how fast they're doing it, so on and so forth. It does kind of sound like a video game or maybe like a computer or if you're pressing keyboard buttons, but those clicks are the sounds those bats need to be able to detect when they echo off or bounce off a solid object. Okay, talked a lot about echolocation. I did see a couple unique things here in our chat. So a lot of people think it sounds like a robot or a xylophone. In a way, it's like an instrument, but it's actually a great tool, especially for folks that are just going out looking for bats or studying bats. Since we can't always see them when they're flying around in the dark, we can still recognize their location, or better yet, what kind of species that we are interacting with, just based on that sound. We do that for a lot of other nocturnal animals too, like owls. We have what sounds like a trash can being rubbed on rocks. I like the sound description, especially since we can't actually hear the bats. It's cool for us humans to give examples in relation to what they might be able to sound like. Speaking of echolocating bats, though, let's go grab him. Now, he's a microbat, meaning he's a lot smaller. So I'm going to do my best to make sure that folks can still see him on the camera. And if you have ever interacted or seen a bat before, it is likely that you've seen this very species. Mostly because they're relatively common, even around our human spaces, and pretty widely distributed, meaning we find them in a lot of different regions around North America. So let's see if we can interact and meet our final echolocating bat. Now he'll stay up here on our log. This is where he feels most comfortable. And you can already tell the size is a lot smaller than our first two bats. He is what we call a big brown bat, though, which I know the name is kind of silly because he's only a few inches long, but he's bigger than the other species we know of as a little brown bat, which we actually find in the northernmost tip of Canada. Fun fact of the day. But big brown bats are amazing echolocators. And it's not just because they use sounds to begin with in order to find things like insects. These guys are insectivores, meaning they primarily feed upon things like beetles, moths, mosquitoes, which I know some people really enjoy, or things like animals we can find in our garden, even things like hornworms, other flies, so on and so forth. But
Landis, is he an adult? Owen was wondering.
Yes, this is as big as he gets. This is as big as big brown bat gets. He is totally an adult. You have to wonder too, their pups or their babies are about half this size, and it takes them a few months or so to be able to get to be full grown. But this is as big as this bat gets. In fact, this guy is Michigan's second largest bat that we have. So most of the bats that live here are this size or smaller. But micro bat, you can imagine, just kind of means smaller size or smaller size bats. And most micro bats use echolocation, tend to be smaller than our human hands, and are primarily insectivores, almost only eating insects. But I have to tell you this. When this guy echolocates, it's actually a really good thing that we cannot hear him, because this bat can be loud. In fact, he can be as loud as the smoke detectors in our houses or the fire alarms in our schools. And you can only imagine if you have 50 of these guys flying around your backyard, how loud that would be at night. We'd have to plug our ears if we went outside. However, you have to wonder this then, okay, if he's a really loud bat, how in the world does he not hurt his ears? If this bat's so great at being able to hear the echo of a sound bouncing off of objects, how in the world does he not damage his own hearing when he's making loud sounds? Well, here's the thing. When he's making noise, when this bat is echolocating, he actually does something inside his ears that helps him to kind of have selective hearing, if you will. See, you humans, one of the other reasons you can hear me is that you have 3 inner ear bones, they're really small, that vibrate when sound waves hit them, and that way you can hear different sounds. However, we could sit here and we could try to move our ear bones, and it just doesn't work. We can't actually move the ones inside our ears. But guess who can? This bat. This bat can move the ear bones inside his ears to make sure he can hear louder sounds. Here's how it works. There are muscles attached to those ear bones so that when this bat produces a noise, he actually pops those ear bones apart. So he can't really hear when he's echolocating. But don't worry, about 6 milliseconds later or so, he'll actually put those ear bones back together and then be able to listen for the echo that he has created. In fact, right now, he's moving around. You might even be able to see his mouth moving a little bit. Oh, hold on, guy, everyone has to see you. And that's actually him echolocating. But listen, can't really hear anything, can we? That's because it's too high of a pitch for him to hear. But having that selective hearing, those larger ears for his face, and being able to produce those really high-pitched, loud sounds makes him a prime insect hunter. Super cool how that works. All right, I know I did see a couple questions. One of the ones is, what kind of insects does he eat? Well, I know, dude. I got to get you back here. Most of the time, they'll eat flies or beetles. They actually can eat insects off of the ground. But a lot of people love these guys because they're amazing insect eaters for mosquitoes. Now, I know mosquitoes aren't a fan favorite for a lot of humans. And luckily, this guy can eat about 1,200 mosquitoes in one evening, and that was the only food that he found. He has to eat about 30% of his body weight, and that's a lot of small insects. What that means, though, too, is these bats, they form colonies. So sometimes you can have up to 100 of these guys. And if you have 100 of these bats hanging around your house, they're pretty much taking care of the insect problem you have. They're amazing natural insect control. But the best thing about it is that helps farmers. See, a lot of times farmers have to rely on chemicals or things we call insecticides in order to be able to kill off insects that can eat our food, our crops. But if you have a bat colony around, they can take care of that insect problem for you and save literally billions of dollars in the farmer or agricultural industry because they don't have to buy chemicals. They rely on bats instead, help take care of the insect problem so that then we have food for ourselves as well. So we thank these bats, not only because they help protect our food, but they also can help protect us in a variety of ways from other insects that may contract or have diseases too. So these guys are amazing creatures to have around our spaces. One of the cool things, though, that we can do for these bats, because in all honesty, there are some bats that aren't doing so well when it comes to their populations, is things like build a bat house. There's actually a lot of DIY or how-tos or bat house kits that people have in order to be able to make bat houses right outside their house or even near our gardens. But really, the biggest thing that people can do for bats is to tell other humans about how great they are. A lot of us either don't know a lot of bats, have never seen one, or actually don't know how great they are for other animals or other habitats. So learning more about them, having that kind of education is one of the great things that we humans can do, especially because right now we're actually talking a lot about bats and diseases, but there's a lot more information out there on how it works thanks to a bat's immune system. Okay, I'm going to pause. There was a lot of talking, I know, especially about this kind of bat. We're going to go ahead and go back to our back to our chat room for it too. See a lot of people wondering if they've tried to eat beetles before. I don't know if you guys are a bat, but insects do have an interesting taste. One thing I will note, though, that insects are a great part of an insect-eating bat's diet because they're chock full of protein. A lot of insects tend to be lower on the food chain anyways, or are usually a big part of an animal's diet because that's their only source of protein, and beetles actually have more nutrients than mosquitoes do. That's why we usually think of big brown bats as being primarily beetle hunters or moth eaters, more so than mosquitoes, because mosquitoes are pretty small. An interesting experience, though, if a human has ever actually eaten a bat or a beetle. Now, are bats dangerous to humans? That's actually one of the other questions we had, too. That's a great question, because one of the things we also talk about, at least in our communities, is a disease we call rabies. And it is true, bats can have rabies, but other mammals can as well. And really, you can only contract rabies if something bites you or if something transfers from the one animal's saliva into your body. Here's the thing. What we tell people is that any time you see a wild animal, whether it's a bat or another kind of mammal, it's always really important to make sure that you call for help or call for assistance, because we never know if that animal is sick, injured, scared, so on and so forth. So it's great to have an expert nearby. However, here's the other thing to remember. Bats, if they get sick from rabies, they, like us, they die. They actually can't survive when they contract things like rabies too. So they're in just as much danger as we are when they have that disease. It's a serious disease, don't get me wrong. Never want to take it lightly. However, as long as you are interacting with bats or watching them at a safe distance, making sure that you're not actually touching them or trying to move them on your own, then you know that you will be perfectly safe from those creatures. We, too, right now, we're actually studying bats more extensively because bats can still contract a lot of diseases or get viruses like we humans do, but they survive. There are actually diseases out there that are very dangerous to humans, but for a bat, they're able to get sick and then get over it. And because their immune system works in such a different way than humans. So we humans in our medical field or through medical research, we actually study a bat's immune system to see if there are ways we can mimic things that happen in their body into our body to help fight off certain illnesses. So from there, then we actually know that in some ways bats can protect us because learning from them and learning how they fight off certain viruses can help us learn how to fight them off as well, especially if we humans get sick from it too. I heard if bats are out during the day, they are sick. It can happen at times, it's true. It's very weird to see a bat out during the day. It doesn't mean they can't be out during the day. Something that's more likely to see is if a bat is on the ground during the day, or if a bat doesn't look like it's able to fly. Usually that means either injured or not feeling well. However, I've actually seen bats hunting or roosting during the day, and they're perfectly fine, whether they're going in and out of their bat house. Sometimes, a lot of times, they'll go out looking for insects if the weather is favorable during the day. So yes, while it can be like they could be sick if they're out and about, doesn't mean they're always sick if they're out during the day. I have one other question because I think we're just about out of time, and I think I see it on here. What is the biggest type of bat? them flying foxes, mostly because they look like giant foxes that are flying in the air. The species called a Malayan flying fox is the largest bat that we have alive today. With that about 6-foot wingspan from tip to tip. It's not super tall, only about a couple feet tall or more, but that wingspan is what makes it super large. You guys had some awesome questions, especially because we usually talk about bats interacting with humans or our human habitats, so on and so forth. So I loved being able to interact with that and meeting the bats here with you. I do see one other question. If you guys do make sure, as we have a little bit of time, somebody asked what the smallest bat was, and that's a bumblebee bat. It's about the size of half your thumb or so. It's incredibly tiny, not even more than a couple inches. That's it.
And where do they live? Bumblebee bat.
Bumblebee bat, that is a good question. We don't have any here in Michigan or up in northern Canada. I want to say that they're found more in Latin or Central America, but I don't actually remember off the top of my head. That's a good thing that I can look up too. I believe they're insect-eating bats, though, so areas where you can find a lot of insects.
That's awesome. So thank you so much, Lannis, for teaching us about bats and all their really helpful qualities. I think that's really comforting for a lot of us to know that they're helper animals, and being a keystone, explaining again what a keystone species is. We've done that a couple times this week. We've got a lot of applause here for you. They just loved it. We're going to be visiting Lannis again to learn about owls, and then we're going to book her programs again for us, because there's always such great information that we get. So thank you, Charlie and Jack, for coming. They said it was incredible. We hope you guys come and join us for Lee. She's going to be talking about some really cool body parts, because if you guys like science, you're going to love Lee. Everyone knows Lee from the Cleveland Museum. And then the astrophysicist to talk about the stars. We've had really great science day today, Lannis, and I was looking forward to this so much, as we all were. Yay, science, Sierra says. Thanks, Lannis and Gibbler. And it's Sierra's favorite subject in school.
Excellent, excellent. I love it. Well, I really appreciate you guys taking the time not only to have me here, but to learn about these creatures specifically. They don't have the best reputation, so it's great to have the opportunity to educate folks about them and more. And we're excited to continue these workshops with you guys. Thanks again for having us.
Thanks, Lannis. Take care.
Thanks, Lannis. Awesome. See you later.
We'll see you guys soon.